Excuses are IOU notes that you hand out to your future self from the present moment. When we create an excuse, on some level, we are attempting to be kind to ourselves, because the purpose of the excuse is to create a reason why we believe we cannot accomplish something that we know deep down inside is our right to have, to live as, to exist as. It can be despairing to come face to face with an idea, with a concept of reality, that the things you want are available to you, but for some reason you're not allowing yourself to have them. And therefore, many times, we will construct excuses. So if excuses are the disempowering way that we point to reasons outside of ourselves as to why things aren't working out, then what is the empowering pathway? In our case, I call this improving. Improving is where you can actually create a story that is a yes and to your current reality, that doesn't place the reasons outside of yourself as to why things happen, and instead guides the journey and experience of your life in a direction that allows you to continue to make choices from an empowered way. So, what's the difference between excuses and improvs? And how can you shift the way that you approach the challenging experiences in your life so that you can continue to operate from a place of remembering that you are indeed a very powerful creator and that you're actually able to experience and accomplish a lot more in life than perhaps you thought you could originally. And you can do so while being in alignment with your values, while being loving to your nervous system, while doing so your way. If this exploration interests you, well then, my friend, I'm Danielle Lynn. I hold conversations with empowered alchemists, creators, teachers such as yourself, who are choosing to navigate their reality, who are choosing to navigate your reality from a place of shifting away from excuses and shifting into empowered knowing that no matter what happens in your present life, you have the ability to choose, and you have the ability to choose in ways that are empowering to you and the world around you. Now, before we dive into this topic, I perceive that it's essential to start from a premise and understanding that there's no shame, blame, guilt, or condemnation. Did I say that right? Condemnation. For having excuses in your life. Because it can be real easy to get hard on ourselves, to get down on ourselves. The funny thing is when we do that, we actually create a cycle of hiding things from ourselves. Imagine the little kid who hides the mistake from the critical parent. Our inner subconscious can do that with ourselves when we judge, shame, or blame parts of ourselves for navigating the way they do. Here's the thing. We can use discernment instead of judgment. To not judge doesn't mean you have to be overly permissive. It simply means that instead of approaching something from a right or wrong or a perceived negative attitude, we approach it from a place of constructiveness. We approach it from a place of curiosity. We approach it from a way of empowerment. And from my experience, this is the way that we can actively shift our behaviors, the ones that are both conscious, the ones that we're aware of, and the ones that we're not so aware of. So, once again, we're starting this conversation out with the awareness that whether or not you have been employing excuses as part of your living strategy, there's no shame or blame in that. There is, however, a potentially more effective way for you to create and for you to move through your life if you so choose to try it out. So now that we got that clear, excuses are often rooted in a place of disempowerment. You can identify if something comes from a place of disempowerment. Let's say in this case, when there's two key things you can note. One is that the cause is something you're labeling as outside of yourself. So this could be anything from the government, from the weather, from the divine source of all that is, from nature, from community, from your partner, your parents, anything that you perceive as outside of yourself. If that is the source of why you could or could not do something, then we have already established that the power exists outside of you, the power of that choice, the power of that outcome. All right. The second part of what makes up a disempowering excuse, so to speak, is that we usually speak about it unfavorably. The excuse usually combines with this concept, either overtly or covertly. I wanted to do blank, but this external force has prevented me from doing what I want. Do you see the pattern in a nutshell? Oh, I wanted to come visit you, but oh my gosh, the weather is just too bad. I couldn't do it. Or, oh, I really wanted to go for that job, but it was just, like I just couldn't do it. It was just too far away. Or, oh, I really wanted to start that hobby, but I just don't have enough time. All of these things fall into the pattern of excuses. Now, if you're listening to this and you're feeling any certain way of hearing this, awesome. I invite you to notice that. Whenever we got these, I'm going to call them jiggly feelings, whenever we got these jiggly feelings within us, we can know that we have identified something that feels at dis-ease, something that is not vibing with what we're hearing. And our job, so to speak, as discerning creators of our reality, is to be aware of that feeling and discern and understand, is this communication telling me something that I'm hearing doesn't resonate with the life I want to live, or is it highlighting something for me that feels no longer like it serves me, and that's an uncomfortable place to be? See if you can spot the distinction between those. It's a wonderful thing to do. For myself, in the beginning, I felt like, ugh, you mean I have to continuously catch these things and discern them? It felt like someone just dropped a bunch of papers on my desk and said, yes, look through this all the time. What I discovered was that as I applied this process to my life, it itself started to become very subconscious, meaning it started to operate at the same level that our breathing often operates at, which is when we're not focused on the breath, it simply runs for us. And in a similar way, when we take on a pattern, whether we see it as helpful or unhelpful, but when we take on a pattern, repeat it enough, and it becomes part of your processing system. So perhaps in the beginning, there's a lot of focus, steps, and energy involved. Maybe, maybe not. However, in my experience, eventually, it becomes second nature. Maybe even first nature. Now, we talked a little bit about excuses. What about improv? What about rewriting your story? A perspective I'd offer for you is that the improv approach, not excuses, but the improv approach, assumes that no matter what happens in your life and your reality, you are ultimately the creator and chooser. So some of the rules or beliefs that might go around that is, even if something seemingly challenging happens, something seemingly that I don't enjoy happens, all right, perhaps this is momentum from a previous choice I made. Very interesting. What does the current deliberate creator that is me choose to do with this new information? Sometimes these things come in because we are subconsciously still creating things that we may not consciously prefer, because subconsciously we believe that will give us what we want on some level. To be clear, if someone says, I want a healthy, loving relationship, but subconsciously they don't feel safe being in a relationship unless it has a lot of turmoil, because they don't even know if they believe they can have a relationship that is safe. Maybe they don't believe they're worthy of one. So they continue to perpetuate relationships that are intense and drama-filled. Once again, no shame or blame. All of this is simply about understanding how we create. Because as we understand how we create, we also bring into view the understanding of what we can shift, what we can let go of, what we can make space for, so we can choose deliberately now. And you might notice a theme here. Part of being a deliberate creator is you never miss the boat. In each and every moment, you have an opportunity for choice. And it's not about making one audacious choice and now everything is only different forever. Might be. But the reason that continues to be true is because in the next moment, you perpetuate that audacious choice, and in the next, and in the next, and in the next. And through this sequence of deliberate focus and repetition and choice, you mold the very nature and fabric of what's possible in your reality. I've had people sometimes share with me their perspectives of how these things I'm sharing are not so, or it's not this, or it's not that. And what I hear when I hear those shares is I hear someone sharing with me this: Danielle, within my reality, what you are saying is not possible. And I say, thank you for sharing. Because they are, once again, creating what is possible in their reality. And from that perspective of the reality they created, it's absolutely true. From their perspective of reality, what I am saying is not possible for them until it is. Until they arrive at a point where they decide or perceive that it is true, then it remains untrue. Same thing when anyone else wants to tell me something about what I have shared or what is possible. I am reflecting portals and possibilities that, from my perspective, you yourself have asked for at some level. So I will say to you, if you're watching this far in the video, either you're like, yes, that is indeed resonant, and if it doesn't resonate with you, then perhaps check the parts of yourself and say, well, what part of myself has been summoning this? Because you're here. And in my reality, we are only here, we are only experiencing things when on some level they resonate with an active frequency choice that we are embodying right now. And this is one of the reasons why these conversations are so powerful. It's why they are so personal. It's why you and I can talk in this way. Because we are just that powerful at creating. Improv is a way of approaching your reality and the unknown situations that you have from a perspective of empowerment. And it's not about, and I like to use this term, it's not about self-gaslighting. It's about finding the place where something you say can be true and resonant for you, and you can riff with that. See, the thing is, some people say, well, what is truth? What is truth? And oftentimes we have many opportunities to focus on what is resonant for us. What is truth is what we have active at any given moment. I'm like pinging the fingers here. These are strums of guitar. That would be pretty cool. You could strum your fingers. And so whichever place you're focusing your energy or attention, it amplifies. It becomes the focal point of what is possible, true, or resonant for you at any given moment. Now, there are layers, just so you are aware from my perspective, there are layers of universal law or natural law that we have all essentially agreed to co-create with together in this experience of being human. For the sake of this conversation, I am talking about our life path and our life choices, our individual life experience. And so, when you want to improv and you want to consider what is true and resonant for you, the more you approach life from a place of non-judgment, the more options will be available to you. Whatever we judge, we close off from ourselves on some level. Once we come to wholeness, completion, and forgiveness with that part of ourselves, with that judgment, with that aspect, we come back into a place of being able to access that. This is why you experience some people very interestingly explore things around, for example, sexual repression, feeling unable to access those parts of themselves. It doesn't immediately mean that people who repress that are just these wild creatures who are going to go off and do whatever, but perhaps if they allow themselves to access what their resonant natural point is for that, and give themselves the resonant outlets to experience and express that, it would all come into balance in their lives. Because whatever we repress or restrict acts similar to water. Have you ever run a faucet and you've kind of jammed your hand on it, and instead of, even if it was going very gently, you jam your hand on it and something goes, it sprays with a lot of force. This is what happens when we block out aspects of ourselves. And I used one example there, but every single one of us has elements inside of us that at some point or another we may have repressed from our view. Some call this the shadow self. I mention this because it's often from that shadow self perspective that we find ourselves making interesting choices, because that shadow self will sometimes put in work orders through the subconscious to bring things into reality. It's quite fascinating. We're very multi-talented creatures. With improv, understanding, discernment, non-judgment, and getting clear on your values, all these things are pathways and portals to being able to speak your stories in a new way. Let's use an example. One is, first off, to embrace what is true and resonant. If I am late for something of my own volition, and that doesn't happen so much in my reality, but it's not impossible. But in the case that happens, what I do is I simply take responsibility. I go, deeply apologize. I was late for this. I would love to blank, have our conversation, do our meeting. May we reschedule? I will make it a point to be there. Thank you. If there was an actual reason, I would say, such an unusual thing happened. Here's what it is. I am choosing to have our experience. How would you like to reorganize? None of this is a denial or repression of what has happened, but at the same time, I am not assigning external reality the consent or permission to be what could potentially derail my plans. This is an interesting one to chew on. A final thought that I'll share here. We may go deeper into this at some point. If you're exploring releasing excuses, there may be a part of you trying to protect yourself from perceived judgments from the world around you. Start with your inner judgments, the places that you're not allowing yourself to love yourself, forgive yourself, and be kind to yourself. Get curious. as you release those within you, you find that the external judgments have no hold on you either. And so, my friend, if this has been of service, I invite you to like, subscribe, and share. Please leave a comment if you have a story to share, if you have an insight that came from this video. We learn a lot from each other, and it's always so empowering to connect together. At the time of making this video, I have several offerings in my description. I would invite you, if you feel inspired to go deeper, to check them out. Some of these things include a group experience that I am cultivating at this time, and I imagine that whenever you find this video, there may be, if you feel drawn, something in the description for you that will be of deep service. And so with that, my friend, may you have a wonderful present moment, and I'm so excited to see what you do now.